Hello viewers, welcome to our class on GST. Today's subject is very relevant one, and that is applicability of GST on residential property. However, before deliberating the matter, I would like to give a very brief introductions about me. My name is Timir Baron Chatterjee. I am the mentor and senior partner of TCN Global and Economic Advisory Services LLP. Today's topic is very relevant one, particularly after the completion of 47th GST Council meeting. You all know that there was no concept of GST on residential property prior to 18th July 2022. That means up to 17th July 2022, there was no concept of GST on residential property. Whether landlord is a registered or a tenant is a registered or not, it was irrelevant. But from 18th July 2022, the concept has been completely changed. Now, the payment of GST on residential property has been brought under reverse charge mechanism, wherein the service user or receiver has to pay the GST. I will discuss this subject on a case-to-case basis. So, from up to 17th July 2022, no GST on residential property. Please do not mix with immovable property. Residential property is also an immovable property. But this exemption was available only on residential property, that is the property which are used for residential purpose only and not for business purpose. But from 18 July, all residential property are under tax net, that is GST net. So, the exemption has been withdrawn by notification number 04/2022 dated 13th July 2022, and on the same day they have brought this item under reverse charge mechanism, and the notification number is 05/2022. That means with 04 they withdrew and exemption, and by 05 they have reimposed it as taxable event but under RCM and not forward charge. So, one thing is very clear that from 18 July GST on residential property, rent on residential property will be on a reverse charge mechanism. That means the tenant has to pay, that means the lessee has to pay, and not the landlord or the lessor. This is most important provisions. Now, we will discuss various concepts. For example, the property is let out by a registered landlord. Registered landlord means he is registered under GST and he has let out the property to a person or to a company who are not registered under GST. That means landlord is registered but the tenant is not registered under GST. As I have already explained, the GST is to be paid by the tenant only. But if the tenant is not registered, how he could pay the payment? So therefore, no GST is applicable where the tenant is unregistered. Whether tenant is a company, LLP, firm or individual, tenant has to be registered. This is the most important concept. So, landlord is registered but tenant is not registered under GST. So, question of payment of GST in this particular case will not arise at all. Next concept. Here that landlord is also registered, tenant is also registered. In that case, there is a applicability of GST on residential property, and as I have said already that GST is to be paid only by the tenant. So although the landlord is registered and tenant is also registered, but GST on residential property has to be paid only by the tenant who is a registered assessee or registered taxpayer. So where landlord and tenant both are registered, as I have explained, the GST is to be paid only by the tenant who is already a registered taxpayer under GST. Now, let us see the impact. Where the property has been taken on rent or lease by a registered taxpayer, it may be a company, maybe a partnership firm, maybe an LLP, HUF, cooperative society, association. In that case, the tenant has taken a property for the residential purpose of its employees. Who is to pay the GST? Obviously, the tenant. Now, whether they can take they have to pay the GST under RCM. So, after making payment of RCM, whether they can take the credit? Answer is yes. Mind that GST on residential property is not a block credit under section 17. So therefore, if you take out a property, pay GST under RCM, and the property is taken for the residential purpose of your employee, it will be considered as allowable expenses under the Income Tax Act, and the RCM paid on such rent or lease charges will also be allowed as input tax credit once you make the payment on account of RCM. Now, take another example where the tenant is a registered and is a proprietary firm and the residential property is taken for the purpose of personal residence purpose of the proprietor. Whether GST is to be paid? Answer is yes. Second question is whether the company after making RCM payment can take the credit? Answer is no. Why? Because this residential property is not in any way connected with the business or furtherance of the business. So therefore, it will not be considered as allowable ITC. So therefore, if a proprietor uses the property only for the purpose of residential purpose, the proprietor is basically using for his personal purpose. So although he has to pay the RCM, but he will not get any credit on account of ITC. This is a very important issue. Now, scenario 1, composition dealer, very important area. A composition dealer has taken a property on rent for the residential purpose of his employees. Now, as composition dealer is always registered, so therefore, as a tenant, there is no question of any doubt about the payment of GST. The composition dealer has to pay the GST under RCM. So there is no doubt. Now question is whether the RCM can be taken as credit. Answer is no. As we have already explained in a separate episode, that composition dealer has to pay RCM, but they cannot take the credit. So therefore, if there is a composition dealer and it hires any property for residential purpose of his employees, they have to pay RCM, but they cannot take credit. So this is an impact on the, or you can say adverse impact on the part of the composition dealer. Next is that we have already explained the proprietorship business. Now in a case where a property has been let out by a commercial organization to another commercial organization for commercial purpose and not for residential purpose, who will pay the GST? Here the forward charge concept will come. Whatever I have told you, that is applicable only for the residential purpose. But when you are taking any property on rent for your business purpose, for showroom or factory or anything like that, their landlord has to charge tax. That rent is not coming, that lease fees is not coming under RCM, that will continue to come under forward charge, and that is already there even before 18 July 2022. So therefore, when commercial properties are let out to another commercial organizations, there will be a forward charge concept and no RCM, and in that case the landlord has to charge 18% GST and the tenant or lessee will also pay the money and take the credit, ITC credit. These are very important. Now if I summarize, we have drawn a very nice format and it is easily indicate who is to pay tax. When a landlord is unregistered and tenant is also unregistered, whether GST is applicable Answer is no. Next, landlord is unregistered and tenant is registered. GST is payable? Yes. What is the process? Process of payment will be RCM, reverse charge mechanism. Who is to pay? The tenant has to pay. Third, landlord is registered but tenant is unregistered. Any GST is to be paid? Answer is no. Since tenant is unregistered, although landlord is registered, no tax is to be paid either under forward charge or under reverse charge. Where both are registered, landlord is also registered, tenant is also registered, and it is for residential purposes. Who is to pay GST? Again, it is to be paid only by the tenant and under reverse charge mechanism, which they will get the credit. So these are the 5 scenarios, and I have explained all the 5 scenarios so that it is extremely clear that there is no confusion about the applicability of GST on residential property effective from 18 July 22, and for all practical purposes the GST is to be paid only by the tenant if the tenant is registered, and if the tenant is not registered, there is no payment of GST on residential property even today. Friends, if you like my deliberations on this particular topic, which is very relevant today, we are getting several queries from various clients about the applicability of GST on residential property. I am very sure after these deliberations things will be absolutely clear, and if you are happy, if you really like our presentations, please like it, please share it, and you must subscribe it. Once you subscribe, you will get various types of videos on relevant topics, not only on taxation but also on macroeconomics, foreign trade, FEMA, finance, accounting, insurance, and also IPR. Very soon we are coming with 3 modules on IPR, taking into account trademark, copyright, patents and designs. So this particular YouTube channel is not meant for only indirect taxations, but it will cover the major commercial aspects, financial aspects, economical aspects of the business and trade. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.